As I wait for my green chair and my green tractor to show up, another shout out to John Deere, our official sponsor of the Truth About Ag podcast. Ever wish all your farm data was in one place so you could eventually find it? That's where John Deere Operations Center comes in. Available online 24/7. Use it to plan work, keep records, and analyze results. That way you can reduce errors and make smarter decisions for next season. Plus, it's free to set up and try out. See why thousands of farmers already trust it on their operations at johndeere.ca/precisionag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag. To the Truth About Ag. You are here with Evan Schout and my co-host Kristjan Hebert, and we are moving forward, distributed under the RealAgriculture Media Network and powered by the Hebert Group of Companies. That is starting to get a mouthful. We got to shorten that up, sorry.
Yeah.
But, okay, I'm starting with one thing and then we can move on to Ottawa and all those other things. I am starting with your tagline in your email says, be curious, not judgmental. And I have spent 3-4 months touring Canada and the US talking to farmers. Why in agriculture are we still not asking the word how? We are speculating. We are saying, why do they deserve this? We are doing all that when it comes to neighbors or industry. Why do we still not ask how?
Yeah, I mean, I think I stole that from a Ted Lasso show.
100%.
Right? Playing darts or whatever, but I mean, obviously we're in agriculture, so I believe in it more than any other industry. I believe in the opportunity. But in the amount of discussions I do with government and other industries, I honestly think sometimes there's just a bit of entitlement in agriculture that we deserve to be here and we deserve to farm. And so the world's moving really fast when it comes to technology and innovation and policy changes. And we can learn a lot from other industries and from bureaucrats, etc. And so that's where that be curious comes from, is that I just truly believe in any small business, and specifically in agriculture that's really asset heavy. If you think things are going to stay the same and profits are going to stay and land's just going to keep going up forever, you're dreaming. I just don't believe in it. And so what can you learn from everyone you have a conversation with, right? I mean, we talk about our 24-hour shifts was a conversation I had with a guy that owned resorts in Mexico, right? Is how we cleaned up a bunch of stuff. And, you know, I got good buddies that own car dealerships that have the same succession problems and people problems and policy problems. You know, if agriculture policy goes sideways, it affects people that own car dealerships in rural Canada, right? So I sometimes think, I'm not a big fan of just a farmer phrase, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Is that small businesses are small businesses. We grow grain. Some people raise cattle. Some people sell cars. Some people manufacture widgets. And they're all very similar. And how you deal with vision, people, capital, and policy will drive your success in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Well, and I think from my perspective, Hebes, the reason I brought it up is that, like I said, I've talked to a lot of farms lately, and big and small, and it always comes to me that when we talk, it was, well, that's from a 42,000 acre farm. That doesn't apply for us. And I think we forget that every farm started at 160 acres. Like, there's not a farm in Canada that's not consolidated. Whether you did it, your grandpa did it, your dad did, like, we're all consolidated. So let's just get that out of the table and quit worrying about that. Let's have the discussion of how did they do it? I mean, when we had Manette on, my biggest interest was how he did it. I don't care that he did it. No. Good for him. He's successful. I wanted to know how. And I find that that's the one question I never get asked anymore is it's not how, it's always, well, there was Chinese investors or there was, or they lucked out in lentil country or whatever it was, but there was always a how story. And I think in ag, we need to realize that that's the first question that should be asked.
I was just looking, the reason I was looking away, I was looking for an email. So I was in Ottawa there last week and sent an email out to 20 or so close contacts, right? Yep. Maybe got replies from 6 or 7. And one good friend of mine spent time in corporate ag, spent time on a farm, has done consulting. So really, really has a good view of agriculture as a whole.
Yep.
And so my one question is like, what's keeping you up at night? What are the biggest threats? And his number one threat was agriculture's isolation and ignorance. Believing someone owes us something. Nobody owes you anything. Be smart and get after it.
You pretty much just said what I wanted.
and he talks to a lot of people, like in every industry, in agriculture. And so, like you said, he's not even using the word entitlement. He's just using that you're in a rural spot. And so if you choose to be isolated and ignorant to what's going on in the world, you are going to move slower than everybody else. It's just the way it is. And that's the same for any small business. Or you can choose that, there's people all around the world in agriculture and in other businesses that got up earlier than you to get more shit done than you did and to do it differently. And my big thing I always find is like, God, if I find an interesting idea, like I want to know how they're doing it.
Well, and that was where the curious, not judgmental part was I think that the majority of people, and not just in agriculture, guys, I'm not just calling out the farmers. I think in society today, we stopped asking how.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I'll use one good example right now. I haven't talked about this publicly at all, right? There's a new fuel company kind of out in Western Canada, Nexus Fuel, does lots of fuel in the ship world. And like they're doing some pretty interesting prepayment terms that gives you a rate of return on your money that I've never seen before. That has to be coming through, covered calls or reinsurance, life insurance based on what I know about it. And I bet you I've spent a couple hours a week the last 3 weeks just trying to figure it out. And I'm going to have to go meet with them because I can't figure it out. Right.
Okay. You brought up Ottawa, so you opened the door for me. Give me your updates. I mean, I know you met with lots and I got lots of questions, but give me your overall opinion first.
Yeah. So, we met with some ministers, but really, we really like to meet with deputy ministers and bureaucrats because that's the one that's going to implement any plan. Yep. So I say overall, I'd say the interesting part was a year ago, the buzzwords were regulation and sustainability.
Yep.
Right. And now the words are productivity and resilience.
Isn't that a good
thing?
In
every sector.
It's not a great thing, to be fair, though.
It's a fantastic thing. And I would also say that the feeling when you're with them is that they're not moving fast enough and they have a lot of pressure from the up above, right? Which would be Prime Minister Carney and Sabia that runs the Privy Council. They're both known to be, workaholics with high expectations, I guess is the feeling that I get. The other really interesting high level thing that I found is I was in a meeting with the Prime Minister's wife. She's an ag economist. That's her education.
Really?
She sat on think tanks about agriculture and food. I would say she definitely, cares about the environment and climate, but I would call it an environmental lean, not an environmental activist.
Okay.
And so I think it would be in the best interest of Western Canada to make an effort to educate her on all the things that we do a really good job of specifically out here, i.e. I always say zero till is the number one thing in regenerative, and we've been doing it for years. And I would say that agriculture and food sure appear to get discussed more than they ever have. And so how do we capture this opportunity to kind of make it an important piece within this government?
Okay. Now, I know you're off social media right now, whether by choice or not, but I also saw your interview with Stackhouse go out over Twitter. So give me the interview with Stackhouse and what's going on, and as well as the funding that got released, right?
Yeah, so RBC had a new report come out next week basically saying that there's huge opportunity in agri-food, but it's going to take a lot of investment. I forget the number. It's in the trillions that we're losing in GDP, but I think it's 13 billion or something they said we need. And it's typically in those small to mid-sized firms. So how do we take companies or farms in agriculture that are doing 10, 20, 30 million in revenue and help them get to 100 million is kind of the way I put it. Because once you get to 100, a lot of the critical infrastructure is in place to keep growing. Whether that be, a farm grows a bit in acres and adds its own, elevator and trucking company, etc. Or how do we take the next ingredient company to create the next AGT Foods? How do we get 100 to 500 of those in Canada was kind of the way I looked at it. I also bugged John. It was nice that RBC wrote the report, but I kind of said it'd be nice if the biggest bank in Canada put more money into it.
How did that go?
And then, well, I know John pretty well, so it kind of went as expected. He knows one of my favorite lines is we test on check writers, not white paper writers. And then obviously we knew about the announcement that came out later. The next day was FCC has committed $2 billion to agriculture by 2030 and has a pledge from another group of companies that have really never invested in ag to put another $5 billion in. So I think the world needs to understand that $7 billion looking at agriculture is a big deal. The rest of the world is pivoting most of their investment money into AI and defense right now, specifically the US. So it's a huge opportunity for Canadian agriculture and agriculture in general. And how do we convince, every good idea, every smart person from around the world that likes agriculture to come here? And then how do we find some big thinkers in agriculture that are willing to grow, 10x from 10 million to 100 million or 30 million to 300 million? And that's it's not an easy thing to think about.
No. And technically, 7 billion isn't that larger than the ag budget right now? Am I wrong?
Oh, it's big.
Yeah, it's really big.
Yeah. How to deploy it? Because obviously there needs to be returns there too.
Yeah.
But how to deploy it is going to take a mindset shift in agriculture, right? And I think the other thing too for people to understand is that FCC has changed how they do business the last few years, and that basically they're taking 50% of their profits and reinvesting it into agriculture. It's not that they're not lending money. I think they're up to like close to 60 billion or something that they lend in primary lending.
Yeah.
But they're taking half their profits and putting it in this investment arm to invest back in the industry. And that's where the money's coming from. So,
and to be fair,
it's pretty interesting.
Where did that go before?
All the general revenue fund of the government.
Right back to the government, where this way it's actually getting reinvested into the industry.
100%.
Okay. Since you were there on both sides of the parties, what's the liberal conservative approach right now for each? What's the differences? Or are we seeing differences?
Well, I can only give my opinion. So I used to get pretty frustrated with the liberal approach. One, they didn't really seem like they cared about agriculture before. They really struggled. Not that the deputy minister and that did, but the party as a whole. Also, it hasn't been business friendly in the past, right? And I think the premier said it good on his podcast, right? He's been to China with two prime ministers. One wants to do business and one wants to do yoga on the Great Wall of China. And he probably wasn't wrong. So I would say, I'm still skeptical, right? My grandpa would probably roll over in his grave to even know I was talking that liberals might do something good for business. And I'm obviously fairly conservative natured.
Yeah, we probably lost half our viewership just with that line.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And I could admit that I didn't vote for them, but at the same time, I guess my big thing right now is I'm super frustrated that the world has went to continuous election cycles. So let's fight and compare platforms for 6 months. Let's have an election. Let's win and lose, and then let's get shit done for 3 years, and then let's start over again. Yeah. And it just seems like right now all we want to do is point out the negatives, not the positives. And nobody can disagree that this is significantly less awful than what we've had in the last 11 years, right? So I just the feeling of we're looking at productivity and we're looking at resilience and we want to get stuff done was significantly different. And then I met with a bunch of the conservatives too, and it's just there's a few topics that have frustrated me, right? The original stance on TFWs, of which they've walked back. The FCC stance, there's been some targeting there that bothers me because I think FCC is one of the bright spots in agriculture right now. And then, I think there's a huge opportunity on the clean fuel standards, which were written by Stephen Harper. You can ask the Canola Council. If you're listening to the podcast, go to the Canola Council. They have research reports on it. We don't blend in as much as the US or the EU right now, and yet we want to have more value add in Canada. So why we can't all agree on this at the federal level and increase our blend-in rate, which is great for the canola industry, and it's great for these policy disruptions on how much we export, blows my mind. I'm confused, right? So it's just this get things done in the interim that I'm struggling with.
And I think it's interesting whether it's Canada or the U.S. I think we both have the same problem, right? It's based on party or individual. We need to start looking at the policies. Like that's the big one for me. Is again, I'm not voting Liberal.
No,
but in the end, right now the policies, I'm honestly not too far off what they're doing right now, as long as they follow through on a few promises.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, I'm sick of an election. Like, let's just keep going and get something in. Let's actually do something. It's been a long time since we actually achieved something in this country.
Well, and obviously, so I pointed out 3 things that the Conservatives are driving me crazy about. But, I mean, PMRA and CFIA and the regulations are making me lose my mind. That's a Liberal problem. Yep. I think they need to be under agriculture. And it's not because I think agriculture cares more than health. Health is a great big shop. And for it to get priority there is slow. And so, I don't like that. I don't like carbon tax. I'm not a fan of it. And we need to figure that out, right? So, I mean, there's lots of Liberal policies too. It's just, it's a lot less awful than it was. So how do we take advantage of the chaos? And that's my big thing. Russia's our biggest competitor in the world. They have every critical mineral and agriculture thing we have.
And they're doing nothing.
And obviously they're in shambles, right? The U.S. right now has a bit of volatility when it comes to what they can get done. We can't miss this opportunity as a country and specifically as an industry. It's life-changing. And so let's get some shit done here in the next 3 years.
Okay, I'm going to pivot you a bit just because I got to spend some time out in Ontario last week, which I've been to Toronto probably 30 times in the last 5 years, but I've never traveled as far as I did outside the city. So pulled up to a Canadian Tire in good old Listowel. I'll give you the credit. Maybe the Canadian Tire wasn't a Listowel, but that's where I was. Left-hand side, I got Tesla charging stations. Right-hand side, I got horse tie-ups. I got to see that, and this is my ignorance, and I'll plate it. I did not realize we still had horse and buggy on the highways in some areas of this country.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, you get up in certain parts of Ontario, it's kind of like driving through Amish country in the U.S.
Oh, it was interesting. Like middle of the night, I'm passing Clydesdales and buggies with wooden wheels and lights strapped to them. It was like I was in a different country for a bit.
Yeah. No, it's we forget how much diversity there is in our country. Right?
Huge. The other one, $30,000 to $45,000 an acre, and one of the concerns was annexed by the cities.
Yeah, urban sprawl is the number one risk. Yeah.
So it was.
Yeah, it's a huge problem in a lot of Ontario and a lot of the U.S. states, right? And then you say you never want to sell, but at the same time, annexation and expropriation is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to say because I also don't think I would do it, but too many times we're really tied to our farm when really the reason we farm is that's where the donkey died, right? It ran out of water when our grandparents or great grandparents or whatever generation immigrated here. Yeah. And so I think, you even wrote a blog on it, is that the family business is tied to the family and the values and the culture and the people you have as part of your business. We want to believe it's tied to that home quarter, but I think in some cases like urban sprawl, etc., like you just don't have a choice. Eventually you're going to have to make the right business decision and keep farming somewhere else and create the same culture and values you have there. Right. But it's tough.
Oh, and I mean, I've used it on both sides of the argument. Like you said, there's an argument that, business wise, we might need to move. The other side is it's also why I don't believe land prices are going to plummet, because I think farms have an emotional attachment to land. Mm-hmm. And that means that historical data can't tell me what a land price is going to do, because I don't have that same emotional tie to my Peloton shares that I had during Zoom. It's not there.
Well, this is kind of the first time in history where our governments print a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
So whether we could see an interest rate spike, anything like we have deep into the past with the new policies they have, I question, right?
Okay, last thing before we jump on with Mr. Marit, who is our guest today. Average age of farmers. I bet with all the there's probably closer to 2,000 farms I've met with in the last 6 months. The average age in those rooms at those FCC summits and at the farmer coach workshops was under 40. And that is not the norm for farm shows.
Yeah, so I think, this goes right back to my pet peeve with StatsCan. right? We have 887,000 farms, 16,000 of them have revenue over $1 million. So the average age of farmer, yeah, it probably is 60 or 59 and a half, whatever they say, of 187,000 farms. The average age of the 16,000 is not 60, right? And there might be a 60 or 60, like I look at us, dad's 65, I'm 43, but that means it's not the 65-year-old that is going to carry it into the future anymore.
Nope.
Right. And so it goes back to the way StatsCan looks at farms. I also think that like we said, this 25 to 45 group has been excited about agriculture for 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
And so we saw that mass exodus in that 45 to 65-year-old group that they told their kids not to come home. Yeah. And now all of a sudden a bunch of the kids are seeing the interesting parts. And then lastly, I mean, I'll also say that whether or not you like consolidation, it's opened up opportunities on farms. Yeah. So if that child loves tech, or they only love equipment, or they want to be a mechanic, or they want to be an agronomist, they can do that 80% of the time on some of these farms that have grown a little bit. And so there's a lot of opportunity to use those skill sets, right? I got a daughter that thinks she wants to be a lawyer. I mean, I'd take one in-house.
Might need one. And then, I mean, the last part that I like is that I think the 40-year-olds coming in, it shows that, I think your dad said it before, and I think you said it, is we've created some monsters in this industry. Like a 30,000 acre farm in Saskatchewan, they are a dime a dozen. And I know that sounds bad, but when I started doing some of the GAR stuff with you, I had the assumption there was 5 or 10. There is considerably more 30,000 plus acre farms in this province. And those aren't just hand off to the next generation and say, good luck. So I think we're starting to see the next generation, whether it's stress, fear, or excitement, either one. Mm-hmm. I think they are trying to find more education, because I've been asked that question more too, is what education systems in Canada should they be attending? What seminars? Is there online learning? Which I've never had those questions before the last couple of years. Is whether it's, like I said, whether it's fear or excitement, they are looking and they realize they need a higher skill set than probably the generation before us.
I mean, if you use $700 of revenue, right? Like, it doesn't take a lot of acres to be over $5 million in revenue, or a lot of head of cattle anymore. And you get to $5 million in revenue, and a 0.5% change in how you do things can have a pretty big effect on your business. I mean, 25 grand for every decision you make that might be a little bit better. That's at a 0.5%. So, I mean, it gets to be a big business, right? And I agree. Like, I mean, and then you just go up from there. I mean, I know good friends in the US that have a farm in one state, and they got a farm in Brazil, and they got a trucking company, but they're 8-9 generations old. And so, yeah, the how you set it up, from a process and a people standpoint, and then the education required, or I would say at a minimum, the network required to be able to ask good questions and get ideas from people has increased. But I think it's awesome. I think it's an opportunity for all these people.
Well, and I mean, I always show the slide when I present on the ceilings of complexity out of the Scaling Up book, and it's 28 million industry businesses in the US. 96% never get over $1 million of revenue.
Yeah.
So if we're comparing this to other industries, I have a lot of farms. You said it, 16,000 in Canada that are over that million. We are no longer just farmers. We are business owners.
Yeah. Well, and that's the challenge, is that if you're at $1 million in revenue, how can you get to 5? And if you want to have a legacy and a generational type farm, I don't care if it's more acres or more cows, or an elevator, or a custom business, or a trucking business, or a software business that adds on to it. But how do you get to 5? If you're a $5 million business, how are you getting to 15? If you're at 25, how are you getting to 100? But it's hard to think that way, because we get so busy every day on what we have to do. But I mean, as we've shared before, I mean, like, my goal was 16,000 acres. When I came home, it was 8.
It was 4.
I was 4,000, and the goal was to get to 8, because I'm still big on, on multiples, right? And at that time, 1 drill, 1 sprayer, 2 combines worked really good for 8,000 acres. So that was the goal. And then, when Jeff and I started talking at the lake, he still got the piece of loose leaf that we wrote down we got to get to 16,000. And I think we, gave ourselves 10 years or whatever to do it. He came on, we were just under 8, and he's been here for 8 years.
I was going to say,
but so it's hard to think about growth, right? But it's, I mean, it, Maverick's growing quick right now. It's people. Like, you have to have good people. And I've always said, in agriculture specifically, but in small business in general, we grow because we know we need to from a revenue and an EBITDA standpoint and the future. And then we go find people. And I've been a firm believer where when you have a chance to hire good people, you hire them and then you grow. And I've had a lot of looks from people within my companies when wages get too high because we got too many people, and then never fails within 24 months. We're like, Jesus, thank God we got a few people trained because this is coming through a fire hose.
Yeah. And I mean, that applies with the internal systems too, right?
Yeah.
Most people say I'm too small for that. You're too small until you're not.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to our guest. That is Truth About Ag. Like, share, comment, subscribe before we jump onto this. And up comes Mr. Marit. Before we get to our guest here on the Truth About Ag, another quick shout out for John Deere. Ever wish all your farm data was in one place? That's John Deere Operations Center. Plan work, keep records, analyze results, all online. Free to set up. See why thousands of farmers trust it at johndeere.ca/precisionag. So back to our political podcast these days, Hebes. We are running through the ministers of Saskatchewan, and today we have the Honorable Minister Marit, although I have been given pre-work that I can call him David, so that's what we're going to go with.
That's right.
So we like to start. Give us the history, David. Obviously, you're a Saskatchewan boy, so let's hear the history.
Well, it goes back quite a ways if you want to take that long, but obviously, I think most of the people know that I farmed all my life in the Fife Lake area. Now we rent the land out. Farmed with my brother for over 50 years, and did that in grain operation and mixed grain operation. Our father had an implement business for about 17 years that he started when he was 23 years old on his own, and it started that in 51 and then wound it down in 68. And bought some land in the meantime. So that's kind of where it started. And I guess how I got into the municipal side was one of those things where the retiring councillor comes into the yard and he says, I think you should run for council. And I said to Ralph, no, I don't have time. We're farming too much. I said, I just don't have time. So he begged, and I said, you know what? If you can't find anybody else, I'll do it. So I don't think he looked any farther. So, and then it kind of led to going to the Sergeant Convention, and 1999, fall of 98, Ron Gleim had lost his election for Division 2. He's out of Chaplin, and he comes up to me and he says, I think you should run for director. So that's kind of how it all started. And then 2006 or 2004, I guess it was, I went for vice president under Neil Hardy, and had the privilege of working with Sink Harrison when Sink was president. And so I had two of the best mentors I think anybody could really have. Sink was a bulldog. He was a real bulldog, but a real thinker too. He really was. And Neil was the calming effect. He was a very diplomatic politician that got through his career that way. And so it kind of guided me that way. And then I took on the presidency in 2006 till 2014. And when Yogi decided to step down, I talked to Brad about running, and he said, yeah, you'd be good here. So I ended up here. So it's kind of where I'm at. And what an honor to be sitting in the ag chair. I mean, to me, and I've said it publicly, it's a granddaddy of all the ministries for this province and probably even across Canada, I'll say it, because it's a real honor to sit at that FPT table and talk to my colleagues across the country and come to agreement where we can. And most of the time we can, and become good friends with a lot of them that are still there. But my maritime colleagues, we affectionately call them the Maritime Mafia, and they're pretty good group of folks down there, and we kind of come to consensus on a lot of things, and they kind of side with us when they see what our challenges are, and we do the same with them. So it's a collaboration, and so to be back sitting in this office and in this chair with these folks is a real honor. And whoever thought a young kid from Fife Lake, Saskatchewan would be sitting in this chair, I can tell you, it sure as the hell wasn't me a long time ago.
Yeah, so I'd be mute Heaves if I didn't mention he's wearing the black hat. So we've started a trend. If we can get this across Canada, I'm actually gonna be pretty stoked. To be fair,
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's lots of stories around the hats, right? I'd
yeah.
like to say that it's just because you and I have both have bad hairdos, shout, but it's turned into a bit of a thing.
Well, my
well,
hairdo isn't much better either, boys, so it's all good. And I thought if I couldn't support a manufacturer in my constituency, then be the right thing to do. And they're a good group of folks down there. They really are very community minded and pretty aggressive and doing a good job.
so you're gonna get a few softball questions from me, Dave, before Kristjan takes over and nails you with some of the hard stuff. So
Okay.
obviously you're back into the agriculture sector again now, being the Minister of Ag. Give me your take. What's keeping you up at night? I guess coming back in where in your position now.
Well, obviously there's challenges that everybody sees and everybody, and the last couple of years has been, uh, talking to a lot of farmers and seeing it firsthand too, and the young folks we rent to is cost of production and where it's getting to, and the return on the investment side, and so that all comes down to trade. And I guess one of the biggest things I've always been a strong advocate for is how do we value add the product here. I mean, I was always envious of the guys up around the Yorkton, Saskatoon area, especially with canola. And we'd haul it to the elevator and get our price, and they were getting 50 cents to a dollar more than we were getting, and because they could haul direct to the crush facility, right? And it's just kind of that side. Probably one of the things that, sitting in this chair where I was in 2018 when I got it till 24, working with my colleagues at the cabinet table to really come up with a good strategy to how do we increase value added processing here in the province. And we did it the right way. We didn't hand out money. We didn't do anything. We did it through a tax incentive policy, which is the right way to do it, because if you don't have them, you're not collecting anything anyway. And plus they're going to hire people, and those people are going to buy houses, pay taxes, and do all of that, and a bigger return for the farmers too as well. So it all goes hand in hand, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I could say, that to be part of this government, to bring that to the province. You just look what it's done in that Yorkton area and Regina, Saskatoon. I mean, holy cow, it's incredible the value-added processing that we're getting into this province.
That was actually I was in Ottawa, a little while ago, and one of the main conversations we had, right? So we showed that canola basis with the China ordeal before it got kind of cleaned up was somewhere between $1 and $1.50 a bushel more at line companies compared to crush, right? So if you weren't within X kilometers of Regina or Yorkton, it was close to $1 a bushel in a lot of cases. And then obviously there was RBC puts out a report, and FCC crowdfunds in their $2 billion plus another $5 billion. So the big question is like, where's this money going to go? Like, what are we going to focus on? Because it's not a bunch of tech startups. Like, there's a few.
A few.
So there was conversation around, obviously, there's a lot of innovation and science around mRNA and different types of crop, not only varieties, but things you can do within that. But obviously PMRA and CFA aren't known as the fastest groups in town. So that's where some money will go. The second one was, and we kind of used AGT as the example. Like, how do we take a bunch of $10 million, $30 million companies across Canada and have them be the next AGT? Like, how do we get them to 100 million, of which then they can find their way to $1 billion? But it seems like, and the RBC report really stood it out, is that those 10, 20 million revenue companies, to get to 100 in the world of agriculture, it takes infrastructure, right? Because it's going to be value add infrastructure, vineyard infrastructure, or lab infrastructure. I didn't realize that biofermentation was one of our biggest holdbacks across the country in the world of our agriculture sciences. There's only one biofermentation lab, and it's out east somewhere, right? So it's that area of infrastructure that I think is pretty critical.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're even seeing it here. I mean, you look at the big companies that are doing the investment, and what they thought it was going to cost them, and where it's ending up. They're really having some second thoughts and just wondering how that's all going to play out. But you're right, Kristjan. I mean, I've had the privilege of going to the food center in Saskatoon, and what I'm really amazed at is these young entrepreneurs that are in there trying to do some things. And whoever thought that I never thought 5 years ago or 10 years ago that I'd be drinking a milk from oats.
Yeah.
I never thought I would. In fact, I was in the airport in Toronto, and getting into an elevator, and a couple of stewardesses got in, and the captain and stuff, and they were holding a Tim Hortons coffee. And the one stewardess said to the other, "Did you get oat milk with your?" Yeah, they have it over at the Tim Hortons. So, it's amazing what that kind of things have started here. And you look at it all where it's gone, and you just look what AGT has done on the whole pulse side, on the processing, and protein is obviously the big thing, right? It is, but you look at what's happening even up at Merrick, or up at Tisdale with that group there, and what they're doing. It's phenomenal stuff. And in fact, when I was there, the one opening, we couldn't go into the one room because they had some patent pending stuff they didn't want anybody to see. So I'm amazed at the brilliant technology that has happened in this province, starting right back, when you go right back to the Burgos and the Olaf Frigstads and those folks that designed all this equipment. We're world leading. We really are world leading. And it's amazing stuff. It really is. And the next 5 years are going to be so exciting in agriculture that it's going to be great to be a part of it.
Well, and Hebes, we were talking before you jumped on, and it was exactly as the minister said. It was the honeybees, the Borgos, the seed hawks, the seed masters. I mean, the amount of ingenuity, not only just coming out of Saskatchewan, but out of Canada on that side of the realm is amazing. And to see it across the world is even more, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously research came up while we were out there. Guy Laflande was at Indian Head, and I'm a little bit biased because, to be honest, I hadn't really kept up on Indian Head research, so I didn't necessarily talk about direct closings. What I talked about is, like, what is the new strategy? Like, if the old strategy wasn't 100% working, okay, but what's the communication on the new one? And Dave, as you know, I sit on the advisory board for GIFs. So I said to him, I actually think you might be able to put research on steroids if you have a federal, provincial, private model like GIFs for these research areas, because we wouldn't have to follow quite as many of the federal rules, right? Like every federal building needs security guards, and they need, and so it's not, when we want to compare what they were putting in, Indian Head compared to what they're sending to Uganda for some inclusion, yes, pisses me off, right? But if they can tell us, here's what we're still going to earmark this money, and we're going to set it up like a GIFs model and utilize that Saskatoon agriculture hub more. Okay. But there just hasn't been any communication, right?
No. And I'm hopeful the next go around at the FPT meet, the next funding model, and we're going to have to start those discussions here in July. I'm hoping that research and technology and innovation will be a big part of that, because I think there is. And I think, the history of this government has always been, we do put a fair amount of money into research, and we know it's a big part of it. But you're right. I've been through GIFs. I've seen what's gone on there, the Crop Development Center and the research and technology and innovation that's going into there. There is a good collaboration that we have to work at. Indian Head, yes, the history is there, right? It is. And in my discussion that I had with the folks here a couple of weeks ago, I had with all my stakeholders, we actually had the seed growers on the call as well, because the big discussion was Indian Head and Scott, right? That's what everybody was concerned about and what's going to happen. It's my understanding in talking to the federal minister that the crops will be seeded this year. They'll be going in and the research and you just don't cut off research. It doesn't just end. It doesn't end. So you're doing gene editing, you're doing everything to find your results, and it just takes time. So we have to find our way through that pathway to say, okay, how do we transition the research? Does it stay there? Do we find a model that works for everybody there? And obviously there's a lot of interest within the stakeholder groups. And my role in this, or our ministry role, will be to guide all this to see how we can collaborate and work it through.
Hebes, can I play a little devil's advocate with you?
Yeah.
So that GIFs data. So first of all, I need you to explain it to the crowd, because I've presented across Canada. Most people have never seen it and don't even know what it is. So that, A, that's documenting a problem, to be fair.
Yeah.
And B, let's at least tell the industry what they're missing, right?
Yeah. So the Global Institute of Food Security, the data is just like the simplest piece, actually. They do ridiculous amounts of cool stuff, not only for Saskatchewan farmers, but for Canadian farms and global farms, through partnerships with companies on all kinds of kind of the latest, state-of-the-art research. But one project they did do, Minister Marit, it was probably you that approved the project, was, the year before COP28, they did a complete third-party study on the emissions per metric ton of production of a Saskatchewan farm compared to a Canadian farm compared to the world. And basically, Saskatchewan is the best in the world at almost every crop. Peas, canola, lentils, durum, hard red spring wheat, barley. I forget them all now, but like almost all of them.
Yeah.
Canada is like top 3. Australia, parts of Australia beat parts of Canada sometimes, but that's just there's big chunks of Australia that are zero till, and say there's parts of Eastern Canada that aren't yet. Right now, the data is phenomenal. It tells a great story. But you're right, Evan.
Nobody's heard.
It doesn't get communicated enough, and part of that's on, us. I think as farmers for not sharing it enough, especially those of us that are vocal. And I would argue some of the private partners and gifts could do a better job of sharing it. But I also think it's because of this fragmentation within agriculture. Like, it is astronomical how many, interest groups there are. I don't, like Dave, I haven't looked at the lobby list, but it wouldn't surprise me if you have the highest number of interest groups that would be registered to come talk to you out of any minister.
Yeah, probably do. Yeah. In fact, when I have my stakeholder calls, I have to have the grains and oilseeds folks on one call and the livestock folks on another call. So, which is fine, right? But at some point, that obviously there's got to be some collaboration, and you're starting to see it, right? Yes. Like flax is now in with canola and things like that, and there should be more. I know Manitoba did it a few years ago. They kind of almost made it mandatory. I don't like the word mandatory. I never have liked it. It's got to work, right? And you just got to figure out how you're going to make it work. But yeah, I agree with you. And I'll just tell you one little story. And I was in Mexico a few years ago, just after we were just doing the study, Kristjan, and we just given gifts, I think $2 million to do the study and get the independent side. And I was talking to the gentleman from Meritech. He's the head grain buyer in Mexico for flour. And he does all the flour for Bimbo, which owns Dempster's. And we were having a chat about it, and he said, when you get those numbers, he said, I want to see them. I said, oh, really? Yeah. Because he said, my buyers now are starting to ask, what's the carbon footprint of the flour you're selling? And he said, especially as European clients. And I said, I kind of gave him some numbers where we were at. And he said, when you wanted the report, he'd see it. He said, that could end up me buying twice as much Canadian wheat as I'm buying now. And he was buying about 400,000 metric ton. So he's not a small player.
Well, it's not something I write a whole bunch of blogs about, but I mean, we get a pretty significant check. I don't know the exact number. Call it ranges between $7 and $20 an acre on a year to year on sustainability programs. Now, I hate the word sustainability, but I only hate it because agriculture didn't get in front of it and own the word, right? But if you look at regenerative practices, the number one is zero till, and we've been doing it specifically in Saskatchewan and then in Western Canada for longer than anybody on earth almost. So my big argument is, what is the date this all started? And at a minimum, I think it needs to go back to the date the Paris Accords were mentioned, because that's when, in theory, people might have started to change, and we shouldn't get penalized for doing it right longer. And like, it's big brands. I mean, Hellman's has been here, Pepsi's been here, and you're right. It's because they have a scope 1, 2, or 3 issue, and we can actually help them fix it. And so, kind of my opinion on it is, we're just doing what we do, and we think we do a good job of it. And I export grain for sale, and if you want me to export carbon, I'll sell that to you too.
Yeah. No, it really is an amazing thing. And I remember when I was in Minnesota talking to the ag commissioner there, and we were talking about this whole thing about zero till and min till. And I mean, the province of Saskatchewan, we're like 95% is either zero till or minimum till.
Yeah.
At that time, he told me Minnesota, and this would have been about 2020, somewhere in there, 2019, I was down there. In Minnesota, it was 2%. It's just a dynamic. And I agree, Kristjan. I mean, it's the best story. And, I saw the transition on our farm. We used to farm half and half. Yeah. Then we got into what we call chem follow, because it was the right thing to do. He didn't want to do it all. And then all of a sudden we're minimum till, because we found out that these pulse crops, we can actually grow them in stony ground if we punch those rocks back into the dirt. So it all works out well. That's the way it is.
Now, that would be an invention. If we can find somebody that would buy rocks, right? I need fields closer to Home Depot, because my dear God.
Yeah.
I think Tarek
Yeah.
there had 63,000 across the farm. Hebes, I think, was what the final number was.
Sounds about right. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Hebes. I'll let you keep questioning them.
Oh yeah. So as I said, I was out in Ottawa recently, and I think there's always a few questions that come from out there. But first of all, let's get your take on the Premier's trip to China, right? And
Right.
and obviously there's some kickback on the outcome about EVs, but I would argue we didn't have a cap on EVs before, and we didn't even get canola down to a 0% tariff. So my opinion is people should quit complaining, and it was a win.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, and I mean, there's still conditions around that too, right? It's till the end of the year, and then I'm sure China's gonna come back with saying they want something else too, and it'll be concerning. I've always been upset that the countries use agriculture as their main tool when you're really talking about food, right? And I think that's a story that's missing. That's missed agriculture for decades. Is just the appreciation that agriculture doesn't get, that it deserves. And, everybody thinks it's a strain on society or strain on taxpayers or whatever the case may be. We've all heard those stories. But the unfortunate part is that everybody just goes to the grocery store and expects the shelves to be full. And they are. And unfortunately, with trade, it plays a political role. And I remember you telling me that a long time ago, Kristjan, about the biggest fear we have as a farmer isn't so much the weather or the prices, it's policy, right? And direction that countries make. And you're right. I mean, just look what China did when they put the tariff on. It just halted canola. And as soon as they lifted it, my understanding is there was 11 ship orders out of Vancouver to get the canola back there. So,
well, and it's timing, right? So you take when the Chinese tariff came on, specifically if you hadn't done any cash flow planning, or let's say you're a young producer that doesn't have a lot of bins and a tight line of credit. Because the other thing I like to complain about is our bank's ability to really do a horrible job of line of credits in this industry. The canola price drops $2 a bushel, and you got loan payments due in a month. If you don't have the cash flow in the bins to take care of that, you get caught in a timing issue as a farmer, it has nothing to do with you. And like I said, I lean on some of the young guys that just haven't had the experience to get their line of credit where they are, or built up enough equity to build that bin. And where now, like you said, the canola price is back to where it was before. Is there some uncertainty built into it? Sure, but it's still pretty profitable where it is. But that policy can create just unintended consequences around timing that it's really hard to have in your plan.
Yeah, well, I think if there's something that we could really do especially on the financial side, when you talk about that, Kristjan, you're right. I think we all lived in that world years ago when your line of credit and you had a due date, so then you had to decide what crop you're going to take the biggest hit on. Yeah. Whether you're going to sell your pulses at, back in the day, it was 20 cents, not, and if you got 20, you thought you were happy. And then, so you decide, well, where's my risk? And if there's something we could do, is the financial institutions should be working more closely with the farmers or whoever. I mean, sometimes they're going to Viterra and getting their line of credit, or JRI, or whatever the case may be. And it should be built on what you have sitting in the bin. And say, okay, it should be a revolving almost, and that's how it should work. And but it seems like they've gone away from that.
Well, I would say the average line of credit on clients A-Shout is between $100 and $150 an acre, and then they use a bunch of retail credit. Yep. We had negotiated ours to $350, but this was like 6 or 7 years ago. Cost of production in the last 9 years has doubled. Right, it used to be $350 now. Well, not doubled, but it went from $350 to say $550 to $600 over the last 5 years. And so you're right. Like the line of credits should just be a function of inventory, prepaids, and your insurance contract, right? Yeah. I guess there's one thing we better throw on the FPT list is banks can't take agri-stability as collateral on line of credits. I didn't know that till about a couple weeks ago.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest frustration, Heaps, is that we're always used as leverage, right? Like whether it's our canola, whether it's our grains, or whether it's even the banks having the leverage to just pull out of agriculture when they get scared or fearful, right? Like it's always, as the producer, you are always the bottom of the rung that seems to get pushed the most when somebody else wants to exert power, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. No, it's Go ahead.
And I think, right, because of the, I think because of the Farmland Security Board, there's some confusion. Yes, and I don't want it to go away for farmers to own the land, but there's still lots of ways for alternative capital to lend money on land, no different than a bank does. And if there ever was a bad time when they had to take the land back, they have the same rules of the bank where it's 20-day disposal or whatever it is. But so I think other money, private equity, pension funds, etc. Of course, they wanted to own the land. They wanted the appreciation. But it's not that we can't start to crowd them in on the debt side of the land, to lend money to farmers to buy the land, right? And so I think as farmers, we need to have more conversations there. And I was with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank not that long ago, and like the thing is with these big companies and the big government funds, like 100 million is a small project, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I said to them. We were with them right around the canola trade deal, and the only money the infrastructure bank had put into agriculture was on the irrigation project. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys need to figure out how to either crowd farms together, production ag together, or you're never going to deal with them. And I said, something right now would be if you had a 1%, no principal payment except when you want it loan on bins, and people could get up to, call it a ton an acre, or whatever the number is. I've never done the research. That would be one of the biggest change on how to handle policy issues. Yeah. If they actually didn't have it out in grain bags or piles and didn't need to get rid of it in October and November. Yeah. And they were like, geez, we'd never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, but that's because a bin's a couple $100,000, not 250 million. And so how do we get you to think about agriculture? Because it's a bunch of small companies. It's not the oligopolies that you're used to dealing with.
No. And I wonder when we're going to get to a point, Kristjan, where mortgages aren't going to be 25 years or 30 years. They're going to be longer than that. I mean, Europe's there, and everybody, and I can tell you, when we heard all that, we said, oh, wow, who would ever want to do that? And
every farm I work with.
And maybe that's where, I talked to a friend of mine here at home not long ago, and we were talking about that, and he's got a mortgage on some land where it's pay interest only. Yep. And he says the assets more than double since he bought it. So he says, I'm paying interest only, and it is what it is. But there's always, I think we have to look at the whole ag financial thing a lot differently now. I think we do. Yeah. My concern, even with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, and I'll take it from another perspective, guys, on that is, when as a provincial government, when you're looking to federal government to come along and partner, and you're looking for a grant or some, a way to make it viable, the first thing they say to you is go to the infrastructure bank. Well, provinces can borrow money cheaper than the infrastructure, or as cheap as the infrastructure bank can, but it shows up on your balance sheet, right? And that's the challenge you have with it. Yep. But when you can show that the federal government is going to see a massive return on their investment through taxation and everything else, and you can show those numbers, then they should be coming in as a partner. But that's the challenge we have now, is everybody sends you to the infrastructure bank.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we saw that, Heaves, when the sustainability grants got publicized there. Everybody had a problem that guys had used them to build bin yards and all that stuff. But then we've had the discussions here of, what about an interest-free loan to a young farmer so he can get his infrastructure in place, or land purchases, or, we're looking at the next generation. I know we got some questions for the minister on the young farmer side. Is what can we do from that banking standpoint to allow the young farms the opportunity? Because right now, the capital requirements for farming, they can't.
Well, and Dave, the young farms are exactly like you said. I mean, my personal opinion is the mindset in farming needs to change too. So I'm an older farmer, whether it's my kids or my nephew or just a neighbor kid down the road, maybe I'm not selling to him anymore. We're just going to be partners. So I'm the bank. I get 30% of the profits or 25% of the profits, like the old crop shares, except I actually have risk and infrastructure, and they get the rest. But same thing, no interest on the financial statement.
Yep.
And magically, banks really like to use, EBITDA and EBIT and everything else to look at. You pull out interest, it makes farms look pretty profitable. I mean, we look at them all the time, and that a good mentor of mine always said, do you want old and rich or young and poor, or young and aggressive? Because that tends to be what it is in agriculture. And I said, well, I want both, right? It's why we tried to structure our succession agreement the way we did, because, the old and rich sure makes your income statement look good. You got lots of equity and no interest. But also the young and aggressive person is the one that drives growth and keeps looking for the innovation. And so I think the mindset on how we set up some of these partnerships in the future is going to be pretty unique, no different than your exact comment on the infrastructure bank and you guys.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we have to look at it in a lot of ways in that regard too. And I'll take even the cattle industry and the grain industry both. You know, you look at the cattle industry now, the prices the way they are, and some of the older ranches are looking to get out because of everything else. Well, they're going to have a pretty big tax bill to pay at the end of the day. You know, and it's the same thing with farmland. I mean, even if I look at myself now, there's no sense me selling my farmland now because I'll pay half it's going to go to for income tax on capital gains, right? So how do we figure out, instead of that going to capital gains or to how everything else, and find a model that works, just like you're saying, Kristjan, that works out for me to sell it to a niece or a nephew or some way to transition that way. And yet I still have a lifestyle for what I need. But not only that, but you have other family members that you want to care for as well, right? But you're trying to make it work. I think there's a lot brighter people than I am, that's for sure, that got to sit down and figure out how to do this and get it right. And that's what I think has to be done. That's a discussion that really should be taking place. I've had that discussion with 4 or 5 young farmers that came into my office here a year ago. Had that very, very concerned. How can we buy land? You know, they're paying this big price down, you know, in our area, and it doesn't pencil out. Everybody says that it doesn't pencil out, and it doesn't. But you just figure out, well, how do you make it work? Yeah.
Okay, Hebes, we got 2 CPAs attacking him with financial questions. Let's flip back to political for him. Just I don't want to see him sweat too much. Let's be fair.
Oh no. Well, but it's good in that, you know, I think it's always good to hear, right, that we all agree that the mindset needs to change on how the governments work with farms and way the farms work with farms, right? Like, I think there's, you know, things like no capital gains if you sell your farm to another young farmer and you invest back in Saskatchewan or Canada, and hopefully that's in agriculture. Like, why we want to put the economy on steroids, let entrepreneurs not pay as much tax and put their money back in the economy, right? I think there's lots of ways, but look, so we'll you know, I think on PMRA and CFIA, right?
Don't get me going.
I know. How do we help you find a way to get those back under the purview of agriculture, number one? And number two, it's my understanding that it was either in 2015 or 2017, they actually changed the mandate, specifically in PMRA, but I think it was in CFIA, where they took out, you know, they basically took out the productivity statement at all and just went to regulatory. And I mean, 100%, but safe food, safe water, we all agree with that. It's that, what's the cost to go from 99.9 to 100? It's really, it brings you to, it's an impediment to speed, right? So I guess really that's kind of my question.
Yeah, it is, Kristjan. And obviously, you know, I've been fighting this fight since I got onto SARM, and I went to Senate hearings. I've been to Ottawa all the time and talking to federal ministers. And you're right. I've always said that PMRA and CFIA should be under the Ministry of Ag. It really should, and for all the right reasons. You know, because it can streamline processes. It can get us new products that could be. You know, we have a big challenge with getting new product licensed in this country. So how do you get private investment to come and even do that kind of research when they're looking at 4 or 5 or 6 years down the line before they can even get their product approved, and that side of it. So you know, I'll take that argument to the FPT meeting. I take it every year, every time I went, is saying that PMRA and CFIA, and you look at right now with the challenges we're having with each one of them. You know, you want to talk about a regulatory regime where it's really stifling and really impacting not only agriculture but the environment as well. It really is. When you look at what PMRA is doing and on some of the restrictions they're putting on us, and what CFIA is doing as well, if they go through these regulation changes, that especially on CFIA, it's going to have the massive impact on the livestock industry in Western Canada. It is.
Yeah.
If they do this, I couldn't see any young rancher wanting to get into this business if they're going to put those kind of restrictions on the movement of livestock. It makes no sense to me at all. I think we've got one of the best programs right here in Western Canada with Premise ID. Over 95% of the producers here, pretty well anybody that's, growing a substantial herd of cattle, they're all in it. Alberta and here it's mandatory. It's the right thing to do, and we're tracing it all that way. The Americans don't even have premise ID. And yet we're probably importing 400,000 or 500,000 head of cattle from the United States every year into this country to be fed and either shipped back or slaughtered here. So,
well, and I think if I've got one call out for the listeners, the one thing I heard in Ottawa is, depending on which group you're talking to, they really want more and more concrete examples. So if you have any, if you're listening and you have examples of restrictions in PMRA or CFAA that are holding you back, and you can do a little one-pager, either send them to us or send them into the ministry, and we will make sure they get forwarded, because it is the way the federal government works. The more concrete written down stuff you can send, the honestly, the more attention it gets.
Yeah, and the challenge I have with it, guys, is when I go to FBT and we try to get PMRA and CFIA on the agenda, the folks at the Ministry of Agriculture say, well, that's not our ministry. That falls under health. It doesn't fall under us. And then, so, I remember when we did get a presentation a few years ago with PMRA, I mean, the people I had in the room were the same people that wrote the regulations I was trying to get taken away. So you're challenged by that stuff. So it's frustrating to say the least, but you're right. It should be. That's where it has to be. I think if we're going to move agriculture to a place and be world leaders, they have to be moved into the Ministry of Ag. They really do.
Well, and I think you look at it too, like health is a really big ministry.
Yep.
And there is enough issues for everybody in health to be working on all day, every day, that I can understand why PMRA and CFIA would get put on the corner of their desk. I'm not questioning their prioritization. What I am saying is put it in a ministry that will prioritize it.
That's right.
Right? Like I a lot of times I think it's a matter of, is it getting prioritized, and is there time? So then the easy button, which is just regulate more, gets hit, and they can go back to working on human health stuff, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree, because then it'll be a priority. It doesn't mean anything about people. You just move the people. That's all you do.
Yeah.
You still got to do what you got to do and go through the process, but at least they have to answer. And that's one of the motions I brought forward a few years ago at the FBT, was to strike a committee to deal with PMRA, and that's still moving, but there's some challenges even within the Ministry of Ag, federally.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the concern I have with it.
Yeah. So what other themes do you have for the upcoming FPT? Obviously there's PMRA and CFIA. BRM always takes a big chunk of it because it's such a big chunk of the budget. We talked about research and innovation. What are the other key points?
I think that's kind of where I'm at, Kristjan. Just a couple of weeks ago, I told you I had my call out with my with all the groups here, the commodity groups. I did the grain and oil seeds and the livestock side, and I made this very aware to them. I said, look, we're going to be discussing on what are going to be the pillars at the next FPT. We kind of have that, but what are going to be some of the guiding principles around that and what's going to come into it? And I've asked them all to submit something. We've started the process of putting it online. We're going to ask for online submissions. Timeline is tight, but it's okay. I don't mind tight timelines. That means everybody gets down and gets it done, and it is what it is. Because it seems we're farmers, we're procrastinators. If you extend the timeline, we'll wait till the last day to do it anyway. So I'm trying to, I told them I'd like to have them all in by end of April for sure, because May from there on, guys they're in the field or they're calving or doing whatever. And then I can take something in July, and that's kind of where my focus is. And we'll maybe try and bring, and really you can do it, online is probably just as easy for everybody to sit around the board table and say, okay, here's what was here. What can we have a discussion? They can take it out to their membership, do what they want, but then we can have a wholesome discussion on how do we want to roll that out. And then, right now we're trying to figure out what the federal government is going to do with these facilities, these research facilities here in the province as well.
Well, and Hebes, the big one for me is, I saw Real Ag put out the poll the other day about having ad hoc payments, right? So when we run into another canola, what's that look like versus BRM versus the other side? So I think it is top of mind. And as you mentioned, Kristjan, agri-stability, we've gone down that rabbit hole enough to figure out, is it assignable for banks? Because it's a pretty strong program for us right now, even with the cap at what it is. And what's the next step towards not only the agri-stability, but towards crop insurance and all the other, farm income programs we're using?
Yeah, you raised a good point, Evan, and I think that's something that's going to be a discussion at this one too. Is the federal government took ag stability to 90% in 2025, right? Is that going to stay, or is it going to go back? And how far back does it go if it does? And that side of it, I mean, and whether the programs at AgriInvest, I'm sure is going to be a discussion. I remember a few years ago with the former ag minister, Minister Bibeau, when we were having that discussion, and that was when we had the whole livestock issue with feed and the drought, and we were looking for an ag recovery program to help them on the trucking of that, and of course then all they were saying is how much money was sitting in Saskatchewan in AgriInvest accounts. Wow. And and if there's something we could do there, I've always maintained that if a farmer or rancher wants to pull out his AgriInvest, let him pull his or her own money out first, and leave the Fed money where it is, and they'll get their tax dollars out of it at some point. But when they pull the Fed dollars out first, well, you're going to pay some tax on it, and then that. So if you pull 50 out and you only get 25 of value, then it really doesn't do what you want to do with it.
I've always said, like, on agri-stability, I mean, I think 90% is crazy from a government perspective. I like it from a producer perspective, but I think it's unaffordable. However, the cap going back down to 3 million pissed me off. I'm not going to lie to you. The 6 million going back to 3, right? So I think the caps were a bigger deal to a lot of farms. It's getting to be a really big number of farms that cap hinders versus the payout percent, right? And then I've always struggled with AgriInvest. I'm not going to lie to you that that 10,000 being matching, it's a gift. So I don't think the 10,000's right, but my philosophy's always been is don't get rid of AgriInvest. Have it be our tax management account. So if we put 100,000 in there, it's a write-off. If we take the money out, it's income. And so your farms can use it as smoothing, right? No different than they're doing with cattle and fertilizer and everything right now. But I think it gives the farms another option that they don't have to give it to a supplier, and they don't use expedited depreciation, which I think is the worst rule on earth to fix taxes. Yeah. But secondly, from the government perspective, then all of a sudden what's in your AgriInvest account means something to you as the Minister of Ag. If they're at the highest amounts they've ever been, that means that farmers have put money in there to help smooth income. It means they actually do have rainy day savings. Yeah. Right? And if it's empty, that means nobody has a tax problem, which means nobody's made any money.
That's right.
Right. And so I think it actually could become a real conversation versus right now it's a savings account. It never gets that big. It's a bunch of small ones, and so the feds can use it against you. Where if it can be used as a cash to accrual tax account, now all of a sudden it's a real discussion of what's going on in the different industries, right? And you can deem your AgriInvest account based on your agri-stability. Is it grain? Is it cattle? Is it mixed? Is it vegetables? That you guys could even break it down by which industry is healthy and which one's not, right?
Yeah.
And then allow it to be invested no different in certain funds, no different than your RSPs can. So it helps bank reserves, it helps taxes in agriculture, it helps the government know what's going on. And I think there'd be a ton of upside in that account having that flexibility.
Well, and I'm glad you raised that, Kristjan, because that's the kind of advice that me as the minister need. And that's why you have the discussion with smart people to say, okay, if this account is there, and if the federal government or somebody's having a problem with it, and because it's there, that why is it all there? Is there a reason why people aren't using it and aren't utilizing it? So let's fix the program. Yeah. That's all it takes. If we just can make a few adjustments, then let's have a serious look at it. And then they'll have to take it back, and their treasury board analysts will look at it all and say, okay, how does that impact us? And my folks will do the same thing here, say, what does it do here for us too as well? But I think it's a discussion that has to take place. It has to.
Well, and the other one, Hebes, that I find big is the mixed farm discussion, right, around agri-stability, is that the guys who have went out and spent the money to diversify and have run multiple operations, and they've done the risk management themselves, all of a sudden they get penalized, while the ones who haven't done the risk mitigation still have agri-stability to fall back on, where I don't have a mixed farm that, unless something goes through the barns in the supply managed side, they're never going to collect from agri-stability, to be fair.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, enterprise accounting, right? Yeah. In today's world, it was way harder even 10 years ago, but in today's world, I think enterprise accounting and I think the internal books of farms are slowly getting better and better, which lets some of these options become available, right?
Yeah.
The Go ahead, Minister.
No, I'm just going to say the farming whole industry has changed so much in the last 10 years, just because everything. I mean, we've added 1 or 2 zeros onto those income accounts now, and it changes the whole perspective, and your operations now you need some expertise, giving you some advice on what, I was just a farmer. I mean, that's all I wanted to do is grow a good crop and watch the neighbors and look for improvements and see what they're doing as well, right? Everybody does.
Yeah, the other two things you brought up, Heaps, thank you for bringing up that you shouldn't buy a combine as a depreciation of tax. Please do not do that.
Yeah.
And then the B part is that I'm hearing a lot. I mean, we've got quite a few U.S. producers that come up for the coaching program, and their idea of the bailouts is that it holds the land price up. Guys just reinvest that cash back in, and it drives the price of land up. So what's your two guys' opinions on, are some of these programs, especially when they get up to that profit insurance discussion that we have once in a while, Heaps, mm-hmm. Are they inflating the land prices right now by keeping producers at a steady level?
So I mean, on ad hoc payouts, I mean, Canada hasn't really done very many of them compared to the U.S. And I can devil's advocate that. I can say I think they're ridiculous. Why? But at the same time, I can look at all the ad hoc payments our government gives to other industries and other countries and be like, where do we rank on the importance list, right? So it kind of, which side of my mouth do I want to talk on that day?
Yeah.
Agri-stability, for sure as margins increase. But at the same time, so the stronger the operation you are, the stronger the margin you have. And and it is a 5-year average. So I'm a belief that the strongest ones is what you want to have, make sure we get through, right? Like, so if they're we always say my favorite farms are those that want to help themselves, right? And there's the odd one of bad luck. I mean, we're using averages that'll create bad margins, but my issue is probably more with crop insurance than it is. Evan was setting me up to get in a debate with you here, Minister. So you can exit stage left on this.
Hook, line, sinker.
I personally struggle. Crop insurance is getting better on the way they use the actuarial data and affect the individual crop prices or premiums. You've seen large changes in the last 3 or 4 years, specifically on premiums based on your personal claim history. I give a ton of credit on that. And Evan, as we shared before, like, I'm a nerd on BRM, right? We had a private crop insurance company. I don't own part of it anymore. But I've dealt with the same reinsurers the minister has to deal with. I've dealt with the feds on private insurance. I believe we need a mix of both. And so, when it comes to crop insurance, there's just some little rules within it that I struggle. One is that grain farmers like to complain about supply management. And yet most grain farmers I know don't have no idea that the subsidy on crop insurance between the province and the feds is north of $29 an acre before you pay your premium.
I knew I would get that out of you.
Yeah, and so I just make sure we know this before we start throwing shade. And believe me, I have my opinions on supply management too. But let's just have an open book if we're going to have the conversation. Secondly, a few of the rules with crop insurance I struggle with as farms expand. So, a father's son can have 2 contracts right across the road, but we can't have a separate contract 50 kilometers away. Or a farm we buy out or rent that's been in crop insurance for 50 years, I can't take their contract over because I've never paid premium. Yeah, but that land has had premium its whole life. And I've talked to the minister directly about some of this stuff. I think all the programs have their place. But at the speed of change in our industry and technology, which allows us to collect way better data, I think they need to have a little more fluidity on pilot programs in order to try stuff and then implementing wholesale if they work than we have in the past. The 4 or 5 or 6 year FPT plan is almost too long for some of the changes that are taking place in agriculture, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and I agree with you, Kristjan, on the crop insurance stuff too, and I'll even go to ag stability. At one point, I kind of felt as government, because you're paying part of that risk as well as the government side of it. I said that, instead of going to 90%, I was wondering. You're right. I think there is a mix there. I think there's a balance. I think we should be back. I think it should be 70% or whatever, 60, and then let the producer decide on the private side if they want to top that up and bring it to whatever case it might be. And I think that discussion has to take place. think of the crop insurance stuff, we're really trying to do some things there. I'm trying to get to a place where you're right, farms are getting bigger. They're getting bigger, and so you're lumping everything in, and you're 50, 60 kilometers apart, and you have a wreck on one operation. You know, if it's 20 miles north or south and didn't get any rain or it's got whatever, I'm sure some of the farmers are probably looking at their operations and saying, you know what, I'm going to self-insure and assume I'm going to lose 20% of my crop. And you know, how does the program work? You're right. I mean, when you look at the compensation side from the federal government and the provincial government on premium and crop insurance, if you just take, you know, the farmer opens up his statement and sees what his bill is, well, he's 40% of the premium. So add the 60% on, you know, another 60% onto that, and that's the total premium. And it's concerning from from a government perspective when you look at the risk. You know, last year we were over $12 billion worth of risk. That's getting to be a big number. God, when I first got here in 2018, I don't know if it was 8 billion. I think it was, you know, so the values have gone. You know, we've tried to keep up with the prices have and things like that. I was happy we went to what I call the individual coverage side. I think it rewarded those that were doing well, and if you weren't, then and I know cases even in my own area where farmers really appreciated that because their yields were better than their neighbors because they were just doing more, right? And I think that's the right way to do it. The challenge I have with it is how do we transition to this? And I'm still trying to figure out a way for the large farmers, because it'll come to a point where, you know, you take your operation, Kristjan, you take some of these guys are going to say, you know, paying that kind of premium, do I want to do it, or am I just going to self-insure myself and put that $700,000 or $800,000 in the bank, and then and hope to God if I can grow an average crop and do whatever, we'll lose our biggest part of our farmers, our biggest part of our acres, that are really the ones that aren't probably costing us that much money when you break it down on the size of the farm and the cost per acre.
Well, we did all the data when I was still at Global Agri. So I've never been in crop insurance, but we've checked it. I mean, basically I think we would have claimed once in the last 20 years, and it was a small claim on canola. Yeah. So that would have been a ton of premium. And yet there's some benefits to it when it comes to dealing with banks, right? Yes. So that's why we'd look at it. But it's the grandfathering in clause. I can show you my yields for the last 5 years, but because I haven't paid premium. Yep. But the issue is the majority of land I farm did pay premium for all those years, and we can't seem to get over that. But I agree with you. When we were doing the private-public comparisons, a lot of the people not in crop insurance were the top gross margins, the top yielders in the province, which actually brings your cost per acre significantly down across the province, and your risk, as you know, from an actuarial standpoint. Yeah. And that I don't think most farms understand that $12 billion of risk is that, like, there's reinsurance has to be bought on that, and you can't buy it for it all. And if it starts hitting the general revenue fund very often, which probably the next big claim will, as farmers, we need to pay attention, because everybody gets to vote in this province. And if you're in downtown Regina, they won't be real excited when they see that coming out of the general revenue fund in the future, right? So it needs to be, I 100% think there needs to be government programs, right? I 100% think there need to be private programs, but I also 100% think they need to be actuarially sound, which then allows reinsurance to take a whole bunch of risk off the table for not only the farms, but the governments and the taxpayer, right? And it's like you said, though, it's just grown so rapidly. Cost of productions have grown so rapidly in the last decade that it's been super hard to keep up on that. Yeah.
And you probably know in a lot of cases that the banks are demanding that you're in crop insurance too.
Yeah. Yeah. So the two issues that I located, Hebes, is I mean, we saw AgriStability pull back, let's be fair, when they did the expense margin coverage, because they knew if they ever had a claim, it was too big for the coffers, right? The other side of it is the banking side. They take assignment of crop insurance, but I could walk into any national bank and ask them how much you're insured for. They don't have a clue. No. So and don't get me wrong, I'm throwing myself under the bus here to get nailed, but at the same time, I've been in enough bank meetings that they understand less about insurance than the producers do. So having an assignment on crop insurance, I had a customer the first year they used private. They signed an assignment on crop insurance. They didn't even have crop insurance, and the bank never checked, never looked, didn't realize they were in private. So essentially they were uninsured from a banking perspective. So it's just, there's very little understanding, and don't get me wrong, the complexity of the programs, how they work together, those I've got 15 years of looking at farm income programs, and I still have trouble with some of the nuances of the new programs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Well, we've had him on for 53 minutes, so let's nail him with your last questions.
Yeah.
Unless he's got other things he wants to cover. I got time.
I got three I always like to ask at the end, Dave, and I always tell everybody they're selfish because it's how I like to learn. So the first one I like to ask is, over your career, what's one or two pieces of advice that have stuck with you forever?
Holy cow! You know what? I'll go back to a gentleman I heard speak when I first got into SARM. I went to Alberta to their conference, their municipal conference, and Ralph Klein was the premier. And I mean, he got up to the podium, put his elbows on the podium, and kind of had his hands like this, and just talked, right? And he made this comment, and I've said it publicly to a lot of people, and I kind of live by it because I'm pretty privileged this way to be surrounded by it. He says, you don't have to be that smart to be the premier of a province. You just got to surround yourself with smart people. And I think if there's something I've taken away from all of this, guys, is that I've really learned to listen. I really have and I've been privileged, whether I was at Ministry of Ag or even at Highways. That if you got a good strong team at your ADM and your DM level that are giving you good information, the biggest thing is your ability to trust them and want to trust them and take their advice. It's a good thing, and I live by the other words of a very good friend of mine, Neil Hardy, when Neil Hardy was president, and he was handing the torch off to me as the president, and he said, David, he said, you'll be a very good president. You just have to learn to control your temper.
Yeah. So that's a good one.
So I kind of live by that, because sometimes when you're sitting across the table from some people that kind of get when you're trying to drive a point or an agenda and you just can't get it through, sometimes your hair gets up on the back of your neck and you get a little, so you just got to calm the waters. And Neil had that calming effect on me, while Sink was the bull in the china shop for me. Neil was the calming guy. So that's probably the greatest privilege I had, is being mentored by those two gentlemen.
Shout, I forgot to go on a tangent at the start so Sink Harrison's a Mooseman boy.
Yes.
And so I don't know what Mooseman has in the water about this bull in the china shop and being fairly aggressive and needing a calming factor around them. But he's a local legend.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Okay, question number 2. What's your favorite book?
Oh gosh, I'm not a big reader, Kristjan. I'm not, because I'll read 10 briefing notes here after I'm done talking to you and
no favorites.
It's been a while. Even when we were in Mexico for a couple of weeks, and my wife loves to read. I think she read 6 books down there in 2 weeks, or it might even been more, but she loves to read. But the one book that I can remember I read that I really enjoyed was a Robert Ludlum book when he came out with the Born Supremacy books, and I read the very first one, and those are my favorite books. And I'm kind of that fictitious. I'm not into to brain teaser books.
Well, and you want to know what your comment about good people. So, I mean, I've known you for quite a while now, mainly in your time as minister. But I mean, I would say one of your political savviness is you sure have the ability to get good DMs and ADMs, right? And so on the show, I'll throw a little shout out that, if people don't know Bill Gruel and Amy Standish, they should, right? Yeah. And that over the years, I mean, Kevin Frant, like I can name quite a few. Burton, like you've had some really great ones, Rick Burton, that have done great jobs, and so you really do. I can vouch that you live by that advice, that you want to have the best people on your team.
I really do, and even when I was Highways, I had Nithy there for my DM, and then I had Fred. Then I had Fred Antunes as my deputy, who was an engineer that really, I was really privileged. I've been very fortunate that way to be in these two ministries, but. Yeah, Rick and I did a lot of traveling together, and the same thing with the team here in the office here. I've been very, very fortunate to have good staff, and you got to have it.
Yeah.
As I say, it really comes down to, Kristjan, what I said before is really trusting what they're telling you, and that you're trying to. I mean, we have an agenda, right? I mean, government has an agenda, what you're trying to do and accomplish, and if you got the right people to help you drive that agenda in the right way, and making sure that you know all the other side of it, that if you do that, here's what could come back at you. You got to know that too.
Yeah, Nithy, there's a human I wouldn't want to get in a math contest or a Jeopardy show against.
No way.
Yeah. So my last question is, and this one really suits you, is take regulation and all that out of the way. So you got a magic wand, and you get to do something in 2026 that allows, Saskatchewan and Canadian agriculture to be the powerhouse it should be in 5, 10, 25 years. I don't care if it's short term or long term. What would you do with the magic wand?
Oh, Kristjan, there'd be so many things I'd want to do with it. I look at our trade side and how we're expanding that. I think it's important. We talked about it earlier. It's been a goal of mine that if I could have one of those two agencies under ag, I'd take PMRA. I really would.
Yep.
I'll tell you, if I could leave this chair and have PMRA under ag, I would say that would probably be one of my biggest successes, and hopefully so. But I think the one thing that I've prided myself on is I've listened to the industry stakeholders on where we can make changes and we can do things better than we can. And I think research, technology, and innovation is going to drive the ag sector for the next 5 or 10 years. And my job will be to promote it globally. And that'll be my goal.
Perfect.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I got no complaints. So again, thank you, Minister Marit, for coming on with us. Obviously, we're making our way through the whole caucus. But again, and thank you for wearing the black hat just to fit in for the last hour.
Yeah.
For those
thanks, Evan.
You betcha. For those listening, like, share, subscribe, and comment. And that is the truth about ag.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.